Hey everyone, Alex Bennett here at the PGA Tour Performance Center at TPC Sawgrass. This video I'm going to really detail how I went from averaging in the mid-40s for my HRV and how I ended up doubling that in about a span of a year and a half. I'm a big fan of Whoop. I've used Whoop as a measurable for quite a long time. They've got a deal with the PGA Tour, obviously. I actually was a customer of theirs before their deal with the PGA Tour, so I've always been a fan. I also have a Sleep Number bed that measures HRV, and a lot of people ask me how accurate I think those beds are, and I don't think they're accurate at all. I think the wearables are definitely the most accurate. I know my bed itself was measuring my HRV in the 120s. Meanwhile, my Whoop was measuring it in the low 40s. So there's definitely a big difference between the two. So make sure when you're looking at these numbers, at least you have some sort of wearable. Those are going to be a lot more accurate than a bed. So pretty much I always felt like I was a really healthy guy. I was eating a very healthy diet. I didn't drink much alcohol. I really did not understand why my HRV was so low. And it's important to tell people that HRV is very dependent on the individual. So don't go comparing it to other individuals. But your goal should be to raise the HRV as much as you can, right? So I was very much, I wouldn't say obsessed, but it was close to figuring out how to raise my HRV. So one of the things I did, I took a food sensitivity test. I took that test to a company called Equilife. Dr. Stephen Cabral is the head of that company. I really trust everything he kind of does and preaches. He's a naturopath. He's a functional medicine doctor. He does a really good job at putting out quality supplements as well as quality testing. There's very specific directions to the testing to get the most accurate results. So I ended up doing a food sensitivity test, and it ended up coming back that I had sensitivities to eggs, dairy, gluten, things that I thought maybe were healthy foods. I was eating a lot of wheat bread. I was eating a lot of eggs. I really have never been much of a dairy guy. I don't have a lot of cheese. I don't drink regular milk. But I really found it interesting just because eggs were a daily part of my diet. So I cut out eggs for about 6 weeks. I reintroduced them. And as soon as I reintroduced them, I had them for breakfast one morning. I felt like, I think it was a weekend. I had them for breakfast around 8 o'clock, and I felt like I could go to sleep at 10 a.m., 2 hours later. My body definitely was having an inflammation response to the eggs, something that I thought was a healthy staple, and it should be part of everybody's diet, and it turns out it really should not be a part of my diet. And it was pretty cool to see my body's reaction on the Whoop. After I ate the eggs, my heart rate went up. My average heart rate for that day was actually higher, so my body definitely was having an inflammation response to that food, and it was causing my HRV at night actually to be much lower just because my average heart rate was much higher. My body was literally fighting off the food I thought was healthy. I wasn't a huge bread eater to begin with, but it was helpful to know that the wheat was actually causing me some issues. I changed to a gluten-free diet. I don't eat a lot of foods that are the fake gluten-free foods. I just try to eat a lot of whole foods as far as like meats, veggies, fruits. If you stick to those things, you don't really have to worry about the gluten-free foods. Some of those foods just use substitutes that are much worse for you than actually the wheat that's in them. So I'm not a big fan of just trying to find foods that are gluten-free or labeled gluten-free, processed foods. So I cut out a lot of the processed foods. I cut out the gluten. I cut out the eggs. The eggs were huge for me, honestly, because I was starting out almost every day eating eggs and wondering why I was so sluggish, why I was a little bit foggy-headed in the morning. So I switched to just gluten-free oats. I was eating those with some fruit in the morning, and it was insane how much better I just felt throughout the day. I had much more energy. I was much more clear-headed, just sharper overall. The second step I took was to really pay attention to my caffeine intake. So my job here at the Performance Center, it's a lot of early mornings, so I'm usually getting up around 4:45, anywhere between 4 a.m. and 4:45, and I'm in here at the gym at the latest. Most days I'm starting around 6 or 7 o'clock, and I really want to make sure I get up in the mornings and I'm ready to go just so I can bring some energy to the gym. Clients aren't looking at me like, well, Alex, why are you half asleep? You're supposed to be my energy here. So I try to get up early, get myself going for the day. My routine before was to have 2 cups of coffee before I'd even get in the shower. Now, obviously, I was having coffee well within the 90-minute window before you wake up. which, as we know, you want to try to sustain that 90-minute window without any caffeine, and then introduce the caffeine to your body. You're just going to have it last a lot longer. All caffeine does is really block adenosine, which is the chemical in your brain that makes you sleepy. So I would end up just feeling like I was going to crash anywhere between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. that afternoon. And then I would just go to another cup of coffee, and then I would end up crashing at about 8 p.m. at night. I'd be exhausted. So I really had to look at my caffeine intake, what it was actually doing to my adrenal system. And I realized that I was really taxing my adrenal system. So I was in this like fight or flight mode basically all day. And I'd be really tired. My heart rate would be higher than it should be. So my HRV at night would be higher than it should, or lower than it should be, just because my HRV was higher. So cutting back on the caffeine was a big first step. Now, the next step I took was to take a organic acids test. So an organic acids test kind of measures the different bacteria in your stomach, sees if you have anything that's maybe overgrown or taking over more than it should. You really want a balanced stomach. You don't want to get rid of any bacteria. You don't want to get rid of any natural occurring fungus in your stomach, because all those things are things that we actually need to properly digest different types of foods. So I took an organic acids test. It came back that a bacteria called Candida, well, it's actually a fungus, I had too much Candida. It was basically overgrown, and it's a very common issue, and it comes a lot with people that either have gluten sensitivities, don't digest sugars very well, and what I found out was the order in which you eat your food is very important. I was always, let me eat my meats and veggies first, and then I'll have some fruit at the end of my meal, or my carb would be at the end of my meal, so that it felt like a dessert almost. Come to find out, meats and veggies take about 3 hours for your body to digest, so they're just sitting in your stomach. Meanwhile, you have fruit sitting on top of that meat and veggies that's just fermenting in your stomach, creating yeast, creating Candida, which ends up being not great. That stuff spreads really fast. It grows, it multiplies. That's what it's there for. So I ended up having to change the order in which I ate food. So I started eating my fruits first, my lighter, veggies second, and then I'd eat meats and the thicker, starchy veggies third. That made a big difference for me. I actually noticed it immediately, and just the way I felt, my stomach felt. I had no bloating. I didn't have any stomach pains. I had a lot more energy after I ate. I would eat food before and I'd feel like I needed to take a nap. My body was working so hard to digest, and in turn it was spiking my average heart rate, which in turn at night was causing my HRV to be way too low. Now I know that sounds kind of crazy, the order in which you eat your food, but it's actually an ancient Ayurvedic medicine. Basically anyone you talk to in the Ayurvedic medicine part of the world, they all know that. That's something that's been practiced for thousands of years. And it makes a lot of sense when you really go into detail and research how long it takes your body to break down certain types of foods. And it makes sense that, you really don't want these foods going in last, because they're going to be sitting on top of the other foods that haven't digested yet. And they're just going to be fermenting and causing issues inside your gut. I'm a big believer in making sure your gut is healthy. I think it's one of the most central important things in your body when it comes to your overall health, your skin health, just the way you feel, your energy levels. It's amazing how important the gut is for that. And by just making simple little things as far as, I'm going to eat food in a little different order, can really pay long-term dividends in your overall health. So after I found out, I did this organic acids test. After I found out I had the Candida overgrowth, I did what was called a gut detox. It was 90 days. I couldn't have any garlic or onion, because I found out those were prebiotics and they actually mess up the gut bacteria in your stomach when it comes to digesting food, especially if you're eating large amounts. And I definitely like to season my food pretty heavily before. So that could have been some of the issues that caused my gut issues in the first place. So I did this 90-day detox. It was all just natural supplementation to help limit the Candida in your stomach and replenish the healthy bacteria in your stomach. So I was really just feeding the good bacteria and starving the bad bacteria in my stomach. So what I did that for 90 days. It was very difficult. No alcohol, no sugars, no complex carbs of any kind. I couldn't cheat with a pizza. I couldn't do any any types of breads, anything like that. So that was definitely a very tough 3 months, and I would say it's probably not for everybody. There was some mornings I woke up and I just didn't feel great just because of all the movement that was going around in my stomach as far as the bad bacteria, trying to starve the bad bacteria and feed the good bacteria. But I mean, after the first month and a half, I felt so much better. It was insane. I had a ton of energy. I never woke up with any bloating. I never had any bloating after meals. After meals, I'd feel like I actually was getting energy from my food like you're supposed to, and I wasn't wanting to go lay down on the couch and just digest my food. I was also eating a very strict, healthy diet. I was only using sea salt as seasoning. I was eating a lot of lean meats like chicken and fish. I was eating a lot of good veggies. My snacks were basically veggies and hummus, things like that. I was really glad I did it because I've grown to really love that snack, and I feel really good after I have it. So I'm glad I did it because I probably would have never tried that as a snack or as a guilty pleasure snack especially. And it's definitely changed me for the better. But it was amazing during that time, especially after I got over the first month and a half, how good I felt and how much my HRV was starting to spike. Just how much energy I had all throughout the day, how well I was sleeping. I was sleeping through the night. And at that time, we had a 2-year-old, and I was still sleeping great. So it was definitely working. But it was really helpful to see on the Whoop just each week how much better I was getting. The average each week, they were sending me my weekly assessments, my monthly assessments, and it was cool to track that. And it made a big difference in just me sticking to the plan. Being able to see how much better it's getting pretty much in real time really helped my motivation just to stick with it. I knew it was working, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to actually see the data in front of you. It just helps people stick to their goals and stick to their plans. So far I've detailed everything I've done as far as just diet, resetting my gut, getting rid of caffeine. I haven't even talked about cardio yet. So I've improved. At this point, I was averaging in the mid-60s HRV, so I've already bumped it 20 points. And I haven't even really made an adjustment to my workouts, to my cardio. I grew up playing hockey. I grew up playing sports like basketball and baseball. Obviously, I grew up playing golf as well. But I was always a big fan of quick cardio. I didn't see the point. I've always struggled with cardio if there's not a ball or a puck involved. I'm like, why am I just running? What am I doing here? So I had to find something that would fit my style and keep me engaged, right? So the first thing I did, and I knew I needed to focus more on that zone 2 cardio level. I just like to do sprints, things like that. And I still like to do sprints. But they're not the only cardio I'm doing anymore, right? So I had to find something in that lower impact, that zone 2 cardio, something I could sustain for 20 plus minutes or so, and not get out of that zone 2. So I ended up investing in a rower, and I put this rower in my garage. It's something I've found that's very easy for me to maintain that zone 2 cardio. It helps with my posture as well. I'm working that posterior chain. I've really grown to love just the technique involved in it as well. It keeps me engaged. I like to put up my phone right in front of me. I have some music going, obviously, but I like to have my phone in front of me with my Whoop data, and I can see real time if I'm in that zone 2. And if I'm bumping up to zone 3, I dial it back. I lower the intensity a little bit. If I'm starting to get into zone 1, I up the intensity. I stay in that zone 2 for about 20 to 25 minutes. I do that about 3 times a week as well. So that's been a big game changer for me, just because I've always struggled with cardio. I did do a little bit of road biking around here. I found being on a road bike, it's just hard to stay in zone 2 because you get stopped at lights. You want to speed up during certain parts of the track, and plus I almost got hit by a car a couple times down here. People are crazy driving wise, so I just stopped with that. I'm like, this isn't worth it. I need to figure something else out. I had the assault bike in the garage, and I usually like to do assault bike style stuff, sprint style stuff, med ball work to get my heart rate up. But like I said, I get out of that zone 2. I'm straight into zone 3, 4, and 5 when I do that. So I really had to find some way to do cardio that I could stay in that lower zone and sustain that lower zone for a long amount of time. And like I said, once again, it helps having one of these wearables on. where you can actually see the data real time and force yourself to stay in that zone 2. It just teaches your body like, hey, you start to sense. I start to know immediately, oh, I think I'm getting out of that zone 2. Even when I don't have my Whoop in front of me or my phone in front of me, or I'm on the rower, if I'm here at work and I'm just trying to get some cardio in, I'm on the bike, I can almost sense it. So it's definitely nice to have. It's a good skill to practice as well, especially if you enjoy hiking or anything like that, especially long hikes. You want to try to stay in that lower zone just because you're going to be able to sustain your pace for a longer amount of time. But I've really seen an improvement in my HRV and my average heart rate when I'm sticking in that zone 2 cardio compared to what I was doing before, where I was just bumping straight to zone 4 and I was doing these 30-second intervals, and it just wasn't really showing up in my sleep. But the zone 2 I've noticed has really shown up in improving my sleep quality, improving my HRV, and improving my average heart rate. The next thing I really started to focus on was my routine before I went to sleep. So we always had a running joke around the house. My wife would always call me the furnace because I always ran really hot. Come to find out, that was more coming from my diet and all the inflammation my body was causing. It's funny how as soon as I got my gut fixed and as soon as I cut out the gluten, I cut out the eggs, how differently my body ran. I started to get cold, which I had never really gotten cold in the past. Even growing up in Michigan, I just felt like I never got cold. And I probably had that inflammation response my whole life, and I just didn't know any better. So it's pretty funny how differently my body reacted once I fixed these things. So at night, I really started focusing on cranking the temperature down, cooling my core temp, making sure when I went to bed I was a little cold. I found that my quality of sleep was just way better, and I mean, it's data backed. It's scientifically proven that we sleep better when we're a little cold. But it was always a running joke around my house. My wife would call me the furnace. If our daughter could not go to sleep, my wife would just say, I'm going to put her on the furnace. My daughter would lay on my chest, and she would just pass right out. I'd put her in the crib. So it was always kind of a running joke. Now I don't have that ability anymore, and I'm not called the furnace anymore. But in the long run, it's for the best. But I've really focused on cranking the temperature down about 2 hours before I go to bed. So if I go to bed around 9 or 9:30, I'm cranking that thing down around 7:30. And I like to get it around 68 degrees. That's where I've kind of found my sweet spot. My wife has to sleep with an extra blanket. I love her to death for letting me do this crazy stuff. She knows it's important to me, so I appreciate that. But it's very important to cool our core temperature down before we go to sleep. It definitely affects our how deep we sleep and just our quality of sleep, how hard our heart rates work, or how hard our heart is working during our sleep, which obviously if it's not working very hard, our HRV bumps up, and it's definitely helped me. At this point in my journey, I'm about in the 70s averaging for my HRV. So another thing I started working on was focusing more on my circadian rhythm. Getting up at 4 a.m., 4:45, obviously I get no natural light. There is no sunlight. I can't stand all those motivational guys that talk about their daily routine and, first thing I do is I get up, I get some sunlight, I get in a cold plunge, I meditate for 45 minutes, I work out. I'm like, if I did all that, I would have to get up at 1 a.m. just to get to work on time at 7. So I think those things are kind of laughable sometimes. But what I did was I got a fake sunlight light that I put in my kitchen. As soon as I wake up, I get up, I go into the kitchen, I turn the lights on, I turn that fake light on. I forget the exact parameters of the light. It's like 1,000-watt LED something. It's meant to mimic the sun, but I've noticed a big difference in how much it wakes me up as soon as I see it. Rather than like kind of sitting in the dark watching SportsCenter, waking up, drinking my tea, that doesn't really cut it. So having this light's helped me a lot, and I notice it at night as well that I just feel more ready for bed, and it definitely sets you up. It really matters how you start your day, how your day is going to finish. So I mean that's kind of the whole point of the circadian rhythm, right? I've really enjoyed having the light. I definitely notice a difference in how quickly I wake up. My attitude's much better. I just feel like I'm in a better mood. It definitely has helped me a lot. So the final step I kind of took as in my journey right now, I'm always trying to up my heart rate, so I'm still very much so on this journey, was I started taping my mouth shut at night. I think my wife would like me to do it right about dinner so she could get some quiet because I like to talk a lot. But I started doing it as soon as I go to bed. She gets a kick out of it. She definitely laughs at me when I start putting the tape on. And I'm not a snorer, so I know there's a lot of data behind it helping people who snore and creating them obviously not to snore if they're taping their mouth shut, but it just helps in their quality of breathing so they don't snore. I'm not a snorer. I wasn't even sure if it was going to really help me very much, but I decided to experiment with it. I did it immediately. Just realized how much more energy I had when I woke up. I didn't wake up as much through the night. That's the other great thing about Whoop. It tells me how many times I'm having waking events, and I was averaging about 1.7 per night. So that's actually, when it says 1.7, that's actually about 17 wake events. And a lot of those events, we don't even realize we're waking up. It's just us maybe, readjusting or moving into a different space or whatever that may be. Some of it's obviously us waking up at night, maybe getting a drink. But I went from 1.717 wake events to 8. So, I mean, it was a big difference. I mean, it halved. So it definitely helped me, and I think that's why I got so much more deep sleep. And the other thing on Whoop, it measures your restorative sleep. And I went from averaging about 2 hours a night to 3.5 hours a night of restorative sleep, which is also a big jump. And another reason why I think I felt so much more rested when I woke up in the morning. So I'm a big fan of the sleep tape. I know it's a little crazy. I would ease into it. I didn't ease into it. I went straight into just taping my mouth shut and trying to sleep through the night. I know I did have a moment one night where I woke up and I like swallowed my spit wrong and I went to cough and I couldn't because the tape was on my mouth and I thought I was like drowning or something. I think I woke up the whole house with that one. But luckily it's only happened one time. I'd kind of blow my nose before I put the tape on. I take a drink. I put the tape on, go to sleep. But I've noticed a big difference in just my quality of sleep, how deep I sleep, my amount of restorative sleep, and it's definitely helped my HRV. That was the final step that kind of cracked the 80 mark, and now I've been averaging in the 80s ever since. So I hope you really enjoyed this video. I hope this helps you. Obviously, you don't have to be as crazy as I am with all these different steps and the gut detoxes and the diet changes, but I just wanted to share my journey on my quality of sleep, how many steps I went to, and this took about 1.5 years, probably almost 2 years. So it wasn't like a quick fix. And when it comes to sleep, I feel like it never really is. I think you need to stick with it, but I think that's why those measurables are so important. Being able to see the data, being able to see that it's working really helps you stick to the plan and keep pushing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. I'm going to be coming out with more videos just talking about basic health stuff as well as obviously workout routines when it comes to golf and being a healthier golfer. Thanks again, guys, if you watched. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me, comment on a post, do whatever you do. I will try my best to respond. So hope you guys enjoyed and have a good one.